Welcome back to Taxpayer Empowerment. I'm Jose Melendez, campaign director here at the Texas Public Policy Foundation. Today I'm here with Senator Bryan Hughes, who's one of the leading voices on property rights, housing affordability, and election integrity. We had a lot of success last session on housing affordability, and we're also going to talk about election integrity. How do we secure our elections here in Texas? So just jump right in. Senator Hughes, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So let's kick off with housing affordability. A lot was done last session, but before we do that, let's talk about what was the root of the problem. Why were we trying to address this here in Texas?
The American dream of home ownership is getting further and further out of reach, and we cannot let that happen. We used to make fun of California, San Francisco, how nobody there could afford a house. We weren't happy about it, but it was a California problem. Now we see that spreading across the country, and even now where young families cannot afford what we used to call a starter home is really, really expensive now. So we recognized we cannot let that be reality. Now, renting is better for some folks. Folks can make choices, but we want to make sure that home ownership is not completely off the table. It's so important. It's how most families are going to build wealth, pass it down to their children. It's your home. It's fundamental to the American dream. So we knew we had to do something about that.
Absolutely. You know, as I'm traveling the country, I'm going to conferences, policy summits dealing with housing affordability, and I'm asked to go speak about our success here in Texas last session. A lot of that success is due to your part and your leadership. And one of the bills that consistently comes up every time I go speak is Senate Bill 840, which you champion. Talk to us about why that bill was so important last session.
Very excited about that bill. I can't say we came up with the concept. We were glad to work on it, develop the legislation. And so really it's about property rights and it's about helping people. Think of all the either high-rise office buildings or strip centers or just property that's zoned commercial or retail, but it's sitting empty. It's not being used that way. Why shouldn't you be able to build housing on that property? Well, unfortunately, before Senate Bill 840, if you wanted to build housing where a strip center used to be or where an office used to be, you had to go through the rezoning process at the city. It's expensive, it's time consuming, it's cumbersome, and so a lot of those projects didn't get done. So land and buildings are sitting there which could be providing houses for people. The Senate Bill 840 says if property is zoned residential, pardon me, if it's zoned commercial, retail, you can build residential there without asking the city's permission to rezone. Now we want to be clear. If it's zoned residential, you can't build commercial there. We're protecting residential. We're also expanding residential. It's already unlocked thousands of housing units. Some of those are going to be rentals like an apartment. Some are going to be condos and other types, row houses, townhouses. It's about giving people more choices. As you know, the Lord isn't making any more land anytime soon. So we've only got so much dirt. We have to make the best use of that we can. And if we have land that's sitting there that a local government is blocking it being developed, or a state government or a national government, we have to do something about it. So Senate Bill 840 was a bigger success, I think, even than we expected it once we got it passed and once it took effect.
Absolutely. So just staying on our success from last session, as I think about this, you know, how we're trying to help young families, first responders, teachers, and helping them get closer to achieving the American dream of homeownership. And not only that, but helping them stay close to the communities that they serve. Yes. How do these bills help?
It's just reality. If you have someone who cannot afford a home in the community where they serve, it's a great point. When commutes get longer and longer, they get more expensive. That's less time with my family. It's less time serving the community, serving the Lord. There are so many problems with that. Again, we cannot have a society where only the rich, only the wealthy own their homes, can afford a home. That is not a recipe for success. That's not a healthy society. It's not good for those families, not good for our state. So it's a big deal.
So one thing that we've learned is that now we're seeing the implementation of these bills, and specifically Senate Bill 840, as we're trying to really bring this home, we're seeing some cities in North Texas push back against these reforms, finding, you know, interesting ways to prevent folks from fully taking advantage of Senate Bill 840. What are you seeing out there?
It is extremely frustrating. It is primarily local governments, some cities that have been blocking development, raising the cost of homes. I'm talking about pricing families out of houses. Local governments have been doing this. Senate Bill 840 is a response to that, and now Some cities have, they're taking the position, okay, we don't like Senate Bill 840. We want a plan where everything is, we're smarter than the people, we're smarter than property owners. We're the ones who want to tell you where you can build, what you can build. And so, Senate Bill 840, yeah, it says if there's a commercial zone property, you can build residential. But
Sure.
the cities are saying if you're going to do it, you have to include, you're going to think I'm making this up. One city is saying if you're going to build that residential property, you have to include a dog spa. I didn't make that up. Or you have to have an Olympic-sized swimming pool. Dog spa, I'm not sure what a dog spa is. I'm sure that's cool. I know what an Olympic-sized swimming pool is. But clearly, we have a handful of cities that are trying to put unreasonable, crazy rules in place. And so when they do that, what's going to happen? If it's going to require a dog spa, an Olympic-sized pool, no one's going to build housing there. That means fewer houses and higher prices. It's incredibly frustrating. There may be some litigation about this. Clearly, when the legislature comes back in session next year, we're going to have to go back and make these laws more specific. Local governments have a role, and we respect their role. We will not allow them to block housing and price families out of the market.
Yeah, and to give you kudos, you've been very outspoken. I'm holding an article here that you recently gave a quote to Biz Now. It says, when cities impose outlandish requirements like Olympic-sized swimming pools or dog spas before housing can be built, they drive up costs and they drive up homeownership even further, and it's further out of reach for Texas families. When we start thinking about next session, what does reform look like to address some of these?
Well, it would be nice if we could pass laws that local governments would comply with. When they don't do that, we have to make them a whole lot more specific. Maybe we have to put more penalties in place.
Sure.
I wish that weren't necessary, but home ownership is so important that we can't let silliness like that block home ownership.
So staying on the topic of next session, obviously we had so much success last session, and that's kind of driving us towards next session, right? Where we talked about maybe reinforcing 840 and other legislation. What are some of the other areas under the housing banner that we haven't looked at yet? Maybe something like ADUs, for example, that we'll be pushing next session.
You bet. ADUs, accessory dwelling unit, granny flat, mother-in-law suite, whatever you want to call it. If you have your home, your property, you should be allowed to build a tiny house, to build a mother-in-law suite on your property. You should not have to ask the city's permission to do that on your property. It's remarkable. The market's already responding. Many home builders now are building houses with ADUs, with accessory dwelling units, because they're so popular. Yet, a number of cities, most cities in Texas, tell you, you have to have our permission to do that. Well, that's crazy. This is about property rights. And again, that's where a mother-in-law can live, an adult child, a family member, a student. You can rent that out if you want to. That's just about property rights. So the bill allowing accessory dwelling units, ADUs, as a matter of right, has passed the Senate. Didn't quite make it through the House, but the support is there. So we'll be back next year with that bill.
Fantastic. And just to put a pin on housing, say we have a young person listening to this podcast, what can you tell them about achieving the American dream? How do we get closer to that?
Here's what we're doing in Texas. We're going to make sure that local governments and state governments are not putting up roadblocks, are not adding dumb regulations that raise the cost of housing. We're going to stop that. We're going to continue to push down those property taxes. We are going to do everything we can do to make sure that the American dream is within reach of Texans. We have to do that, and we will.
Fantastic. Let's switch over to another topic, election integrity. So we're here at the Texas GOP convention, and I believe they passed their legislative priorities. And at the top of that list, the biggest vote getter amongst those priorities was securing Texas elections, which I think is very timely because I know we're having a hearing on this topic pretty soon here. I want to zero in on two bills that you introduced last session and that made it along the process, but I think we're seeing more appetite for these reforms heading into next session. Senate Bill 1209, which you introduced last session, which dealt with consolidating all elections, not just your tax increase or bond elections, but all elections from May to November of even years. We've seen scenarios where I'm thinking about back in 2019, Cypher ISD, which is the third biggest ISD in the state of Texas, had a bond proposition for calling for $2 billion. Just 6 months prior to that, we had a huge turnout in those 2018 midterms.
Yes.
But then you fast forward to May of 2019, and that turnout goes to below 5%. And we're passing a $2 billion bond package. That just doesn't seem right. So talk to us about the importance of consolidating those elections.
Folks have election fatigue. There are so many elections, especially when we have runoffs and special elections, and people can't keep up. This is what people tell me. I can't keep up. I didn't know we were voting. Is there an election? I get it. People are busy. They got families. They got work. They're serving the community. So people have election fatigue, and you described it very well. That November, even-numbered year election, that's our high watermark when it comes to turnout, folks participating in the election. But those May elections for cities, schools, again, bonds, tax increases, those May elections have abysmally low turnout. So if the voters are showing up in November, let's bring the elections to where the voters are. Who can argue with the premise that more people should participate? We are for lowercase democracy, where the people participate. We're thankful to have a constitutional republic, and there's a way that our founders gave us that. Within that framework, we have an active democracy. People vote, the people rule. So the more turnout we have, the more participation we have, the better the election. The election reflects the will of the people. So moving all those elections to November will certainly increase turnout, and it should make sure those elections, again, are what the people want, not the handful of people who showed up at the election. Also, when election turnout is very small, it allows a group to come in from the outside and really have an outside influence. We know about foreign money in some of these bond elections, some of these elections to amend city charters, things like that. The foreign money is in the city charter elections, and this would also help with that, because the more voters show up, the harder it is for George Soros or someone or anyone on the left or right to have an outside influence on the election.
So let's peel that back a little bit. So you mentioned foreign funding of our elections. You had Senate Bill 2035 last session, which got at that. It said that, in our country, there are ways that we stop that at the federal level, but there seems to be loopholes at the state level where we're seeing foreign influence trying to pass these ballot propositions here in Texas. How specifically are we going to address that through legislation next session?
So you said it very well. Federal law is clear, and foreign money is not allowed in federal law, in federal elections. It slips in sometimes, but you can deal with it. You can catch it. Unfortunately, in the state system, we do not have those protections. So we had one approach last session. We want to make sure we get the enforcement right, involve the Attorney General's office. We want to make sure we get the enforcement right. But I think we all agree that we don't want foreign nationals influencing elections in Texas. And so we have to get that right. The bill moved through the Senate. It was slow to get out of the process. So we're going to have some more input from stakeholders all across the system to make sure that works. Folks need to know, if you're getting a mail piece, if you're getting a Facebook ad, if you're seeing something on TV, if that's being paid for example, by the Communist Chinese, that's a problem. That's the problem. I think we all agree we don't want them influencing Texas elections.
That's right. So just as a final question to wrap it up here, when you think about election integrity and you think about the 90th session, just very top lines, what does success look like next session?
We want to continue to make the elections more secure, more transparent, so everybody understands. The more complicated and opaque the process is, the less confidence we have in it. So let's make it clear, everybody knows how it works. Continue to clean up our voter rolls so that only citizens and eligible voters are voting. If we clean up those voter rolls, tighten up the process, and get that election day moved, get the foreign money out, we'll be so far ahead. Heritage Foundation says we have the 5th most secure elections in the country. I'll take that. But we should be number one.
Number one. That's right. Well, Senator Hughes, thank you for your time. Thank you for your leadership, and thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. That'll do it for this episode of Taxpayer Empowerment. We'll see you next time.